Hi, and welcome to The Signal. My name is Terry Rice, and today we're talking with Corporate Natalie. As a content creator, Natalie is passionate about educating early stage companies and new creators on ways to grow on social media. And she recently co-founded a virtual assistant business, ExpandVA, with her roommate that works to pair people interested in the creator economy with influencers needing administrative assistance. Let's get started. Natalie, how's it going?
It's great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Let's talk about your title, Corporate Natalie. Where did this come from?
Well, my birth name is Corporate. My parents must have hated me. So, no, I started
I know
making,
somebody named Nonprofit, so that's pretty cool. That makes sense.
yeah, I started making content in 2020 and it was not corporate specific, but the ones that were taking off were these kind of work from home jokes while everyone was remote and in the height of the pandemic and like work just was flipped on its head and the models we were used to weren't applicable anymore. And then I think I just leaned into the corporate side and started doing B2B partnerships and now I'm Corporate Natalie. It's been great.
Yeah. I dig it. And while you were doing that, were your friends like, what the heck are you doing? Like, why don't you do something else with your time? Were they supportive? Like, what was that actual experience like?
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone had their sourdough bread or their like side passion during COVID. I feel like we're all painting the house, we're doing things, and mine was taking to TikTok and posting these videos. That was my creative outlet. I actually sent a video to my friends. I was like, I'm gonna be famous, just so you know. And they were like, shut up, Natalie. There's no chance. And I just kind of kept going at it. And I think TikTok at that time was really easy to go viral. It's a lot harder now. And it really took off. So no, they were supportive. My parents were supportive too. I feel like I wouldn't have done it if I didn't have that support system.
Yeah. It reminds me of Lady Gaga, like friends from her high school. I guess they weren't friends, but people that she went to high school with made a group, a Facebook group that said, this Lady Gaga will never be popular, never be famous whatsoever. So you
I'm
and
sure
Lady Gaga proving the world
that
wrong.
age well. That age is like a fine wine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get into it, right? Because you started this Corporate Natalie account back during the pandemic when everybody's working remotely, and that seems to have taken hold. I'm working from home as well, so my question for you is: how can remote workers take initiative and actually show their value when they're not physically present in an office? Because I have friends that are sending off random emails and articles and always on Slack and everything, trying to look busy, but they're distracting themselves from their actual work because they're trying to look busy. So
Yeah.
what are some tips you might have on how to do that?
Yeah, it becomes like a full-time job trying to play this game of being active on Slack and Teams. It's like no one really cares, no one's watching you. I think to demonstrate your value and to feel like you're bringing value, I would recommend trying to find avenues for entrepreneurship at your job, like being an entrepreneur within your company. Can you join different employee resource groups? Can you lead those groups? Can you be the one to plan the virtual happy hour? Like these things sort of outside of your day-to-day job that allow you to feel like you're bringing some purpose to the role, especially when you're remote and you're in your room 5 days a week. It can become quite isolating. So, entrepreneurship at your company. I think also showing up when it matters, when you're invited to that once yearly conference, when you have one day in the office that the team's flying in and everyone will be there. Of course, if you have, valid reasons why you can't make that, I don't do it, of course. But I think showing up when it matters is really important and making those sacrifices for that in-person time. It's very important to get that face-to-face time. And we don't have tools. Zoom is great. Riverside that we're recording on is great. But we don't have tools that are at all compared to being in person and that feeling and that interaction. So showing up when it matters, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree. And it's like, hopefully nobody starts using virtual reality to connect with remote employees, but
Yeah. And
that's
maybe they do. I mean, maybe, and that would be better, but we're just not there yet. Like Zoom is not the same as being at a conference and sitting down at a dinner table with your coworkers. It's just not.
I agree. And to your point about entrepreneurship, like that isn't that hard to demonstrate because like back when I worked at Facebook, I started this internal newsletter about how to get better at Facebook, right? How to be a better consultant. And it took me like 30 minutes to write per week, but I was seen as like this leader as a result of that. So when people hear the term entrepreneur, I think they kind of overestimate what that actually means, but it can be as
Yeah,
simple as having like a newsletter that you're sending out and just taking
definitely.
initiative for you, yourself and your team.
Yeah, that's awesome that you did that at Facebook.
So when you think about remote work in general, like you talked about some things that we can do right. Like, what are some things, or maybe a lot of things, that corporations are still getting wrong about remote work in general, and how can they improve?
So I think the one thing, and we're still figuring it out, and it's difficult with like real estate and when you're buying these big office spaces to sync your in-office days. But there is no point in going into the office if I'm going to go and sit alone in a little phone booth and I'm not speaking to anyone. I'm doing exactly the same job that I could be doing in my bedroom. It does not make sense, and I think that's what causes this frustration and this angst of like, oh, you just want me to badge in so you can count that, and that's a part of my performance review, when really that's not providing value. It's not bringing this team camaraderie when you're sitting alone. So the number one thing that I think causes frustration is not syncing those days that you're in person and expected to be there together.
Let's keep double clicking on remote work, because you and I think your roommate recently started ExpandVA. Can you share what that is and who it helps?
Yes. So we found in 2021, when I started kind of influencing in content creation, that there was a big administrative burden on creators, especially because I had a full-time job at the time. And there's emails that come in every day with brand partnership opportunities, gifting. There's brand trips that come from this where you're in person and going to events and you need an itinerary and you need to book glam and styling and all this stuff. And it's just a very new world with a lot of admin and actually back-end work, sending analytics to brands after you do a post, these things that you don't actually need me as the creator to be a part of and flex my creative muscles. It's actually this administrative side of it. So we started ExpandVA to pair creators needing help with that side of the business with mainly women wanting a side hustle. I think we're still in the era of the side hustle. Everyone's doing a million things. And so our roster of virtual assistants are just people who mainly work remote, have some extra hours in the week, and are interested in the creator economy and wanting to be a part of it and help out some creators.
Can you share how you're finding the talent that you have, your VAs? Like, what platforms are you on? Like, what kind of vetting process? What does that look like as you're building this business?
Yeah, so it's grown and it continues to change. We're trying to standardize kind of the onboarding process. Right now, it's actually very high touch. Myself and my co-founder interview every single person personally. And we have them fill out this questionnaire of how you would deal with certain situations. And we do a whole resume review. We have them update their resume to be a little bit more like creator focused and creator first and flexing that marketing experience that they might have. And I think you don't think of like Instagram, even that you use personally, as a skill when we're in corporate America, but that is a skill that could be helpful for posting for a creator. So there's a lot of training, there's a lot of vetting, and then there's a matching process. So it needs to be not only that we pre-vet these VAs, but that the creator likes them and feels a good connection with them. And we'll go through iterations of different VAs until the creator feels comfortable. And so very high touch, a lot of work, a lot of hours. I think to standardize that would be our next phase of the business.
Yeah. Well, as a fellow creator, I can tell you that's definitely needed, because often I'm doing way too much stuff that I'm either not good at or shouldn't be doing. So I'm glad that you have that out there in the world and looking forward to seeing it grow. But on your end, you can probably speak to this from your own experience. So as a manager, as a leader, how can we ensure that remote employees feel recognized and valued for their contributions, and not just like, a thumbs up in Slack or something, but again, like when you're not actually in the office, how can you reward that person and make them feel like, hey, look, you're part of the team, we appreciate you, and we want you to stay here?
Yeah, well, so different people are motivated by different things. I think to some people, compensation is important. To some people, having that remote flexibility is important. And knowing what your values are as an employee and communicating that upward to your management team is the only way that you'll be able to work towards those goals and actually get those things. So if you're in office 5 days a week and your goal is to be more hybrid, communicate that and build that trust to then be rewarded in that way. If you want more compensation and you're feeling like you're living paycheck to paycheck, communicate that and say, what do I have to do to manage up to be paid more and compensated more? And use reasons that aren't, fair market value, or I just want to live a better lifestyle. Use reasons that are like, I'm working 80 hours a week. I, do this role, and this. Have your bring the receipts, as I like to say. So understanding what those values are. And then I think for managers, knowing, like, letting your younger employees speak. I was a consultant and I would build these decks that we'd present to clients, and there was just no world in which I would ever have the talking stick and be able to speak or say one thing. And I think especially when you're remote and you're not exercising your voice and you're not flexing that muscle, like literally allowing them to speak and giving them the platform to do that on external calls, even internal calls, is super important.
Yeah, I like the way you're phrasing these questions. You're saying like, what needs to happen in order for this to happen? So I need a raise. What needs to happen in order for that to happen? Because that way you're telling your manager like, this is a possibility, right? There is a reality where I'm getting this. So now let's work together to figure out what that looks like, as opposed to making it like a yes or no question. So that's a brilliant approach for anyone who's in that situation. But let's go back to remote work and my friends complaining about getting on the subway from going from Brooklyn to Manhattan. Why do you think corporations are considering or implementing a return to office, and how can they do so in a way that doesn't lower morale or cause a mass exodus? And you mentioned a few ways already, but what else can they do to have people show up as the full version of themselves, not the version that got dragged there against their will?
Yeah, well, I think the reason we're seeing such an uproar in this is like there wasn't transparency about this, and companies are flipping the switch and saying now we're in office 5 days a week, even after some employees have relocated and moved cities and made sacrifices in their personal life and assumed that the company they're working for supported that because it was 100% remote work. And so when you're flipping the script on that, it's difficult to keep that loyalty of your employees. So I think being transparent in the interview process, in like when you present your benefits package and what to expect in this role from the start of the job is the only way we're going to fix this. Because if you say, there's a chance we're going to have to relocate you, there's a chance you're going to have to move, you're going to be in office 5 days a week, well, great, you shared that. But if you're not sharing that up front, it causes that lack of trust. And so transparency is key.
Yeah, we're aligned there. And I think another thing that's aligned with transparency is, actually, maybe it's not, but one challenge that I see with people who work from home is like there's no separation, right? So it's like you're in your office or maybe just at your kitchen table and so on and so forth, and you feel like you should be working all the time. Maybe because you're proving, protecting, or pleasing, or maybe it's just because you have issues with separation from your work. So what can companies do to prevent burnout and promote some kind of work-life balance among their remote teams? Because even before we started, you were mentioning, hey, today I got in a workout, I'm feeling great. So how can companies encourage their employees or allow their employees to have more time for stuff like that and avoid burnout?
Yeah, I think we have, as the employee, this like guilty till proven innocent mentality of you think everyone's watching you and you think they're watching your Slack status. And the teams and the mostly like manager and employee relationships that I think really work are when the employee feels comfortable to be like, hey, are you watching me all the time? Am I on enough? Do you want me to be more present on Slack? And like really asking the questions to get the answer, because I think typically the answer would be like, no, you're doing great. And like you're bringing this undue stress onto yourself as the like early in career employee, thinking that this is the expectation. On the flip side, I think companies need to do a better job of really reinforcing that work-life balance is a priority, whether it's taking World Mental Health Day off or doing, exercises to understand like what energizes your employees, doing check-ins on wellness and well-being. We get like the annual well-being survey from HR that no one wants to fill out, but it's important to fill that out. It's like, how are you feeling? And if everyone at the company is upset and strung out and stressed, like they'll likely do things to change that. So filling out those stupid little surveys is important.
Yeah, even though they're stupid, they're impactful. So I can dig it.
No one wants a survey, but you got to do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, Natalie, you get interviewed all the time, right? Get asked a lot of questions. So what I'm wondering is, what's a question that you almost never get asked, but you should because your response will be so valuable?
A lot of what I'm asked is about like corporate strategies and remote work and everything that we've talked about. And I think one thing that's core to my identity is being like a woman in comedy and even outside of corporate. I haven't worked a full-time corporate job in 2 years. So all my industry expertise is from like attending conferences and constantly reading up on it and learning about the space. But it's not from like my hands-on, me reporting to my own manager, right? So I think what I do face every day is like being a woman in comedy, getting the ridicule that comes with that, the hate comments, these things that like I think in a way can correlate to being a woman in the workplace and being someone who aspires to have a successful life and being torn down for that because that's not considered feminine or womanly. And I think that's a side of myself that I don't really get asked about frequently that is like a core part of the person that I am and the woman I've become. So that's probably what I'm not asked about.
Let's double click on that then, because one thing I do is I help people build their personal brands, and I'll say things like, "Hey, you got to go on social media, you got to create video." And then I did this like 3 weeks ago, and this woman's like, "Every time I create a video, I have creeps DMing me." And I think that needs to be acknowledged more, because every other guru is going to be out there saying, "Hey, you got to create video, show up," but they're not the ones that have to worry about like the rude, disgusting, unsolicited comments. So if you don't mind sharing some advice on how, like, especially our female listeners can manage that obviously like an experience they never want to even encounter in the first place, but what is the best way that you think they can manage those lewd comments they're getting?
I don't know the right way to manage that, and I think everyone handles it differently. And women have been through a lot more worse things in harassment, even in the workplace and outside of it. And I don't want to like speak on that. Like the best way to handle it. I think there's a multitude of avenues. I think it does take a very confident woman specifically to implement the strategies that you're saying and post yourself online. And I think I had so much confidence in 2020 to post myself without makeup in my dimly lit bedroom and make jokes and put the hate comments aside. And I think that's way easier said than done. So when I'm advising women specifically on content creation, it's like, maybe start on LinkedIn, maybe start with a photo and text post. And not even, this is everyone in general who's not comfortable with video, but I think it's really hard to be in this position, especially in the like finance corporate category where you're not lifted up constantly. And there's a lot of people tearing you down, and in comedy. So I get comments from men all the time like, stop making jokes, you're not funny. And it's like, okay, you don't have to like the stuff.
Do funny people ever say that to you? Because I feel like people who are successful don't try to tear down other successful people.
No, not successful people and not funny people. That's obviously.
Yeah.
I don't have too much like advice for that. I think it's something that I grapple with every day, and it's an interesting like big part of my identity.
Yeah. Well, thanks for speaking up about it. And hopefully some of the people that are listening that are doing dumb stuff like that will discontinue, because it doesn't help anyone, obviously. And normally when people are saying things like that, there's something wrong internally that they're expressing externally. So they got to solve for that and then get back on social media. I think that would work out pretty well.
Totally. And why is it that when a woman's in social media, they're like, oh, how do you make ends meet? And then when a man, it's like, that's awesome that you do that, bro.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's almost like the pay discrepancy that is in corporate is carrying over to the creator economy as well, which is ridiculous. And I have friends, if we want to talk about this, like I have friends that are public speakers or content creators that happen to be women. And what they'll do is they'll go ask a man that also partnered with the same company, hey, by the way, do you mind telling me how much you made? And they're often just shocked and disappointed by the answer they're getting. So I think the point you're getting at is like that same culture of not valuing women enough in corporate or even in entrepreneurship is persisting. And that's why we need people like you and me as an ally to speak up, because it's ridiculous. I see it happen all the time.
Yes. And if you're a creator, anyone listening to this, a female creator, and you're getting a yes immediately when you give your rates for any brand deal or anything, there's something wrong. There should be a negotiation. You're not charging enough if they're agreeing immediately.
Yeah, there should be some friction there, so I appreciate that. But Natalie, I mean, this has been amazing. So I'm wondering, where can we learn more about you? What's the best way to do so? Like, give us all the things.
Yes, Corporate Natalie on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. I'm really excited about LinkedIn. I think I've been posting, kind of experimenting with my posts there, getting into that thought leadership side. So definitely shoot me a follow there for all you corporate listeners.
Awesome. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.